Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming today. And thank you for being our guinea pigs today. Obviously, we have changed location. We will see how many folks still wander in that may be going up to the main building. We've tried to get the word out at the last couple of Launchpad lectures. And obviously, some of you were listening, so thank you for that. We're also experimenting with the tech for today. So if we seem maybe a little bit clunky, and poor Carolyn is also our guinea pig today, so instead of it being one of us that we're experimenting on, it's actually her.
I used to be in the military,
so she's used to it. So in any case, as we're figuring out lighting, as we're figuring out technology for recording these, because we put them online as well. So that being said, as always, welcome to the Launchpad Lecture Series here at the New Mexico Museum of Space History. We are very honored today to have Carolyn Peeler with us. And the key thing today is that we are talking about the Tuskegee Airmen, or she is talking about the Tuskegee Airmen, and we're going to be working with the society that she's a part of to do an exhibit up in the museum as well when we get into March. So in any case, in honor of that coming in March, it being Black History Month, and just the history of the Tuskegee Airmen and everything that they did, a little bit of it kind of being featured in Masters of the Air now as well, some of the sidelights of that, similar. In any case, though, I'm going to introduce Carolyn Peeler. She is the president, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, of the local chapter of the Tuskegee Airman Society out here at Holloman Air Force Base. She has a number of other real jobs and other things out there. But with that being said, please welcome Carolyn Peeler.
Thank you all so much for coming out. And earlier in my talk with a couple of people in the audience, we've talked about how much the military has changed, especially from the time of the Tuskegee Airmen to now, with the technology, with the attitudes, with all of those different things. So I welcome you all to this presentation, and I thank the New Mexico Museum of Space and History for inviting me out. This is probably not the group I should ask this question to, because I know what the answer is going to be already. How many of you have ever heard of the Tuskegee Airmen? What did I say? Probably not the group to ask that question, but you always ask just in case. And I was having a discussion in the audience with some of the audience members, and if you look at that picture, there always has to be someone who's different and stand out, right? There's a guy who's turning, talking to everyone when everyone's facing forward. So thank you. It is my honor and privilege to talk about these legendary heroes. But how many of you know that not all Tuskegee Airmen were flyers? We all associate with them with flying the aircraft in World War II, but there are some of them that were not flyers. They were actually support, and we'll get to that now. So the PhDs and the historians and all of those folks who have done research have told us that about 1,100 to 1,500 people, or 1,000 rather, people were a part of the Tuskegee experience. They were not only pilots, but they were mechanics, they were support folks, they were operations folks, they were medical people. So all of those people that were a part of the Tuskegee experience can claim the title Tuskegee Airmen. And even today, we're still trying to do some research to see if there are any more out there so that we can get them documented and get them recognized. But the ones that were pilots are the ones that are coined the red tails. So Tuskegee Airmen, red tails. So that's the distinction between them all. And as you're aware, they did bomber escorts during World War II. All right. From my research, I have found that 930 pilots actually went through the Tuskegee program. But what a lot of people don't realize is there were people that were liaison pilots and they were service pilots as well. So the total is somewhere around 992. I have seen the number 996 thrown around. So somewhere in the 990s were the total number of of pilots that were trained during the Tuskegee experience, and we're still trying to find information on the service and the liaison pilots so that they will have their recognition as well. What you see here, when they were activated as units, these were the 3 original units that were activated for the Tuskegee Airmen. You had the 477 Bombardment Group, you had the 332nd Fighter Group, and you also had the 99th Pursuit Squadron. There were organizations that were activated at a later time. I don't know how familiar you all are with Holloman's missions, but we had a reserve unit here called the 301st Fighter Wing that activated, and that is one of the Tuskegee Airmen organizations. And when that unit was activated out at Holloman Air Force Base, they actually brought a few Tuskegee Airmen in to be a part of that ceremony. So these were their original units. Any Air Force people out here? No, I'm the only one? You remember Chanute Air Force Base? That was Chanuteville. And that base, of course, no longer exists. It closed down. But that's where one of their bases were. And I believe Selfridge is an Air National Guard base now. So some of those areas where the Tuskegee Airmen units activated, some of them still exist today. All right, here is where the rubber hits the road. They flew 1,378 combat missions. They did 179 bomber escorts, and they only lost 25. Can you imagine? Have you seen those old films where you have all these aircraft in the sky and to only lose 25? I think that's amazing. And one of the notes that I would like to make is they destroyed 112 enemy aircraft and 150 on the ground, and of course they damaged 148. So they did their job during World War II, I will tell you that. And I was able to actually get this from our national office, where they maintain a lot of the archives for the Tuskegee Airmen. Where you see the red stars, those are actual areas that they actually flew over during World War II when they did their bomber escorts. A lot of coverage there, especially over water as well. But I just wanted to give you a pictorial view of what they actually did and what they were actually responsible for in the area that they covered during those bomber escorts. And of course, all heroes garner their medals. So from our research, we found that they received 150 Flying Crosses, 8 Purple Hearts, 14 Bronze Stars, 3 Distinguished Unit Citations, and 744 Air Medals with clusters. So they did an amazing job during World War II, and they were honored for it. And for those of you who are not affiliated with the military, I just wanted to show you what those medals look like so that you had an idea. All right. Some of them ended up becoming members of the Air Force because the Air Force was activated on the 18th of September in 1947. They were a part of what was called the Army Air Corps. So they transferred over. So I'm going to tell you about some of their accomplishments after World War II. Moulton Field is the site that they did all their flying on. And in 1998, then President Bill Clinton made it a historic site to honor the Tuskegee Airmen. From what I understand, it's still maintained as of today, along with a museum at Tuskegee University in Tuskegee, Alabama. That's where a lot of the artifacts are. And just a little bit of history, I do believe they still have George Washington Carver's lab set up at Tuskegee University as well. And some family history for me, my husband's grandfather used to take George Washington Carver his lunch when he attended Tuskegee University. So that's my family history, or my tie to that school. Okay, this is General Benjamin O. Davis Jr. When he started out in the military, he was in the Army. He went to West Point. He was the only African American there in his class. No one talked to him for 4 years while he attended the academy there. But he made it through. He made it through. And his tie to me is he was the first director in the Air Force for manpower and organization, which is the career field I work in. So I'm very proud to have that connection to him. And after his military service, he was awarded his 4th star honorarily. So he served with dignity and with honor, and he also made a difference in the Air Force to the point where the Air Force named an award after him. It's called the Benjamin Oliver Davis Management and Engineering Award because of the great work he did in establishing the manpower and organization function in the Air Force. Anyone heard of Daniel Chappie James if you were in the Air Force? Well, a little bit of information about him. His son was also a general. He was the adjutant general for the state of Texas. He recently passed away. But another tie to my family, his son's wife was my husband's grandmother's neighbor. When I went to her funeral, the lady introduced herself to me and told me that she was Daniel Chappie James Jr.'s wife. So imagine going to a funeral, meeting her. But he was one of the first members of, he was assigned to the 477th bombardment group when he was in. And Chappie was originally from Pensacola, Florida. I think his mother was a school teacher, and I think he had either 15 or 16 siblings. Oh. So he had a very large family. My understanding is the Tuskegee Airman chapters in the state of Florida are trying to have a stretch of I-75 named in his honor. So I wish them the best of luck in getting that legislation passed through. But he retired a couple of years before I came in the Air Force. But one of my friends did serve with him, and she said he was a very humble man. So Chappie James was one of the ones that made general as well. Okay, this is Mr. Robert Ashby. Mr. Ashby passed away, I think, right around COVID. He was in his late 90s. And he was a very active member of the Archer Ragsdale chapter in the Arizona area. One of the things that I was told about him is he was the only Tuskegee Airman that became a commercial pilot. So out of all of them, out of 900 and something people, can you imagine that? He was the only one that became a commercial pilot. And of course, he won the Wright Brothers Award, Pilot Award, 50 years of aircraft safety. Can you imagine? 50 years. And he also wrote some of their manuals and whatnot for flying. So he wanted to fly even after the Tuskegee experience, and we thank him for doing that. Okay, this is General Charles McGee. He might look familiar to you because during one of the State of the Union addresses by President Donald Trump, he was actually honorarily given his 1 star. And he was a part of the original units as well, with the original Tuskegee Airmen. 409 combat missions. 409. And he went on to serve, I think, 30-something years in the Air Force. He had been all over the world serving. One of our Tuskegee Airman Day programs, he actually, during COVID, he actually appeared and gave a presentation virtually. And it was just so great to be in the presence of somebody out of history. But I think when he passed away, he was either 101 or 102. So he lived a very, very, very long time. And even in his hundreds, he was still traveling to air shows to meet people. Can you imagine? I don't even want to do that now. And he was 100, right? Okay. Shortly after their experience, and when a lot of them started retiring, the Tuskegee Airmen decided to start an organization that still exists today called Tuskegee Airmen Incorporated, because they wanted to make sure that their history was captured and that they maintained ties and connections to each other so that they could share all of their stories, because a lot of them were not together, and they wanted all of those things documented in books, in biographies. I think Robin Roberts actually did a documentary on them, because Robin Roberts' father was a Tuskegee Airman. So they wanted to make sure that they had that connectivity and that collective knowledge. And there was a gentleman by the name of Charles Francis who actually coined the term Tuskegee Airmen for them in his book that he wrote in 1955. So a lot of times we want to figure out where some of these terms or names come from. That's where their actual name came from him coining that term. And speaking of making sure things are documented, when Congress awarded them the gold medal or the Medal of Honor, the Tuskegee Airmen organization had to actually go out and find records. That's why you will hear the term DOTA, Documented Original Tuskegee Airmen, because the congressman who got this passed wanted to make sure that these folks were indeed documented original Tuskegee Airmen, and that honor was bestowed on them properly. Of course, the ceremony was held in the rotunda at the Capitol, and I don't know how many of them were there, but I think the room was kind of full with them with their wave of red jackets. So they received that honor in 2007. All right. This is quite interesting. Lieutenant Fred Brewer was missing in action for 79 years. 79. He went out with a load of aircraft and pilots, and him and I believe 4 other people did not return. One of the airmen who returned remembers him getting hit by fire and his aircraft going down. Well, just recently, December to be exact, of last year, his remains were identified by a forensic pathologist. And it was very interesting how Lieutenant Brewer's remains were identified. They were able to identify him through a third cousin. A third cousin. And they brought him home. They had a ceremony for him in Charlotte, North Carolina, and they laid him to rest. And I believe there might be 23 or 24 more that are missing. So they have vowed to try to bring them all back home. So I thought his story needed to be told, and everybody needed to hear it. So that's one of the recent things that had happened in Tuskegee Airmen history. All right, our leadership. This gentleman is Mr. Jerry Burton. Jerry is the president of Tuskegee Airmen Incorporated. Thank goodness Jerry is retired, because he is always on the road promoting the legacy and history of the Tuskegee Airmen. I don't think his wife knows where he is most of the time, because he's always traveling so much. And when I spoke to Jerry, it was a few months ago, and we shared some information. We were both stationed at Andrews Air Force Base together. And Jerry worked in the 1st Helicopter Squadron. He never told me what he did. I don't know if he was a helicopter pilot or a mechanic or what, but we just never got that far. But we shared some of the same ground. And to see that he made it to the top of the Tuskegee Airman organization is very, very, very proud moment for me, especially since I shared a lot of information with him. Our conference was recently held in Albuquerque, believe it or not, and we do have a Tuskegee Airman chapter there called the Lloyd Fig Newton chapter, General Lloyd Fig Newton chapter, and I believe I talked to a gentleman here who remembers when General Newton was the wing commander at Holloman Air Force Base. So he has some ties here as well, flying the F-117. So everything kind of connects together. I think you all are starting to get that, where there's a connection with a lot of these folks, whether they were legendary Tuskegee Airmen or whether they served after that. One of the things Mr. Burton is trying to promote is he's trying to build youth programs to get younger people involved in flying. And there are some of the major airlines that are coming on board with that, saying, yes, we want that too, especially after COVID with the loss of a lot of aircrew that we've had. So we need to start getting our younger people interested in doing those things so that we can have more than 20 aircraft in the air at one time, right? Because we don't have enough air traffic controllers or we don't have enough pilots. So Jerry is doing his part by going around speaking with youth groups to have them have some form of interest in flying, or maybe in flying support staff. And we are broken into 3 regions. We have Western, Eastern, and Central. Well, my chapter is located in the Western region, and Karen is our president. And a little bit of history on Karen: her father was a Tuskegee Airman. So that is why she remains true to the organization, and that is why she does what she does in order to promote the legacy and history of the Tuskegee Airmen. So I'm very proud that Karen still continues to serve in honor of her father. Okay, and we saw a gentleman a few minutes ago by the name of General Benjamin O. Davis Jr., and I've always liked his quote: "The privileges of being an American belongs to those brave enough to fight for them." And that is so very, very true, and I thank General Davis for allowing us to use his quote today. And of course, if you want more information about the Tuskegee Airmen organization, it'll have a little bit more information than what I've presented to you today. It's TuskegeeAirmen.org. Fascinating history, doing wonderful things by bringing young people in to try to get them into career fields, whether it's flying or in support of flying, trying to robust that program so that they can fill that gap that we could potentially have in the future with pilots or flight attendants or maintenance officers, operations officers, those types of things. But I hope that some of the information that I shared with you today was maybe some information that you knew and you got it again, or maybe it's some new information that I shared that maybe you all didn't know about as far as the Tuskegee Airmen. But they served so that I could serve my country proudly and honorably for 25 years. So I thank you for your time today, and I am here to answer any questions that you may want to ask. I saw 2 hands. I'm gonna go with you.
Okay. I saw back several slides ago, you said that there was a book written and the name Tuskegee Airmen came about. What were they called before that book came out? With just a bunch of flyer people, or?
The pilots were actually coined red tails.
Oh, just red tails.
Mm-hmm.
And
then the guy wrote the book, and they realized there was more to it than just the pilots. There was also a support staff that went along with it as well. So they should all be given the name Tuskegee Airmen because they were all a part of that Tuskegee experience. Yes, sir.
When General Davis was at the academy and no one would speak to him, was it because his classmates just didn't want to talk to him, or were they commanded not to do so?
You know, he, from what I understand, from some of the interviews that were done with General Davis, he just never talked about it. He just never talked about why no one spoke to him. And you bring up a good point. They could have been commanded not to, and they were following orders. But he never really talked about that.
Red tails, where does that come from? How did that develop?
When they were in Ramatella, Italy, and their aircraft came in, it was the maintenance guys who painted their tails red so that they would know who they are. And then that name stuck with them as far as red tails.
During the time, obviously, it was segregation during the training and all that. After they became airmen certified and were flying, let's say after missions, were they allowed to commingle with the others, or was it strictly prohibited that, hey, you guys are here and the rest are there? Were they allowed to at least communicate or maybe even socialize with the rest of the Air Force?
Now, a lot of times, Hollywood can embellish things. I will just say that. And I'm sure that you all saw the movie Red Tails when it came out about 10 years ago. There was a scene in there where they were invited to this bar with the other pilots. And when they found out they were African Americans, they kind of told them, yeah, you guys shouldn't be here. But as you're aware, it was Harry Truman, and last year was the 75th anniversary of the desegregation of the military. And that's why I said the buck stops here. I'm doing something about it. There were still some things that were going on, as you're aware, with the civil rights movement in the 1960s. But it was the Tuskegee Airmen who paved the way for everybody to serve in the military as it exists today, because of a lot of the things that they endured. And as I said, they endured those things so that I could serve proudly.
I mean, their lives were risked like everyone else's, I mean. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think I saw a hand back there.
I'm wondering if I don't know if you can even track it, but I'm wondering what an encouragement this must be to the young black community, and how what you're doing is affecting young black people and say, hey, I've got an opportunity that didn't exist before, and get that community excited about what they have in front of them now that these poor guys really paid the price for.
Absolutely, you're absolutely right. But a lot of times, and I don't want to Debbie down the younger generation, but you just have to kind of get them to that point to where they understand and recognize how important these things were in history. And it wasn't just the Tuskegee Airmen, it was all Americans. I mean, everybody wanted to go over there and fight and protect this country and serve this country. Not just the Tuskegee Airmen, everybody did. Because our homeland is important to us. And we enjoy our freedoms, don't we? I know I do. Yes, sir.
What percentage of the Air Force Academy recruits are black, you know?
I don't know, but here's what I will tell you. A few years ago, West Point and the Air Force Academy sent some photos out, and I believe, I don't want to quote here, but I'm going to say more than 10 were women from the Air Force Academy and from West Point. Annapolis did not share their numbers, but I am not sure. Maybe I can ask that question. And to give some history and ties to Holloman Air Force Base, one of our former group commanders here, Gail Colvin, she is now the Chief of Staff for the Air Force Academy. So maybe that's a question I can ask her.
And the current class of 2025, 5.6% is African American, 7.3% Asian, and then Hispanic is 10.8%.
There you have it. Technology in the palm of your hand. Thank you for sharing that.
I'm curious, one of your slides mentioned that the Tuskegee Airmen, one of them flew P-51. What other aircraft were they flying? And may I ask, that introductory slide where you show them in front of the aircraft, that must have been a trainer of some kind. What kind of an airplane is that?
I don't know exactly what type of airplane that was, but I know they flew the P-47, P-49, P-51. So there were several different, there was probably about 4 or 5 different aircraft that they flew.
How about bombers? Were they flying those as well?
Not that I recall. Even though they had a bombardment squadron.
No.
And I think April had a.
No.
Okay,
The aircraft in the opening slide, I believe, was a P-40.
P-40. Okay, well, thank you for sharing that bit of history.
Okay, now my
Okay.
So on the Congressional Medal Honor, there's 4 gentlemen depicted, and they're all wearing different garb. What is the symbology of the different garb that they're wearing?
Let's see, let me go back to that slide.
Oh, you want that? Oh.
Right back to it. Well, it looks like they're wearing different uniforms that they had. One's a pilot, one's a dress uniform, and one is probably a more of a casual uniform or a maintainer because he has the cap on.
Do you know who the men are that are?
I actually do not. I actually do not know who they are.
There was a slide that said they lost 25. It seemed to me that slide was mentioning they lost 25 bombers. How many of the fighters did they lose?
That is a very good question. I can't answer your question, but I can definitely research it and find out. And remember, they were escorts, so the bombers were not them. During their escorts, they lost 25 bombers.
Yeah. Which was actually one of the lowest
Yes.
loss rates of all the escort squadrons in World War II. So not the lowest, but it was one of
One of the lowest, correct. I don't think I see any hands over here, and I don't see any hands over here. But you all have educated me as much as I've educated you, and I definitely appreciate you coming out to learn a little bit more about the Tuskegee Airmen history. On the 28th of March, as that was alluded to in the introduction, that is actually Tuskegee Airman Day. And the significance about the 4th Thursday during the month of March is that's when their units were activated. So that's why we celebrate Tuskegee Airman Day on the 4th Thursday of the month of March. So we will have a display here, presentations, and the such, and we hope that you all are able to come back to visit us as well.
And you do have one more question here.
Oh, I do have one more question.
Well, you cropped up
Okay.
while you were
While you were talking, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
The question was, who I'm going to say instigated, but who was responsible for getting a unit like this together? In other words,
Well,
in the Air Force
Well-
or Air Corps?
Well, Tuskegee had always trained pilots. They had always done that. And I don't know if you all saw a picture of her, but Eleanor Roosevelt was actually the person who kind of sort of told her husband, and we know how influential wives can be, right? who actually came out to fly with them. And she told her husband, it's time.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you've enjoyed this. Let's give Ms. Peeler a round of applause. Thank you.